It is early autumn 101 BC, and on a plain of Vercellae, thousands of bodies of Cimbri warriors lie in heaps as food for carrion and quarry for looters. At the campaign tent of the victorious Roman army and its Italian allies, the twin commanders Gaius Marius and Quintus Lutatius Catullus are busy dividing spoils and allotting decorations for duty and valor. Gaius Julius Caesar, Marius's brother-in-law, is given the honor of delivering news of the victory to Rome. Marius, a provincial himself from recently franchised Arpinum, rewards all of the Italian allies with citizenship to the Roman Republic, a highly controversial action to the patrician members of the Senate. Catullus, arch-patrician, meanwhile, is keen to tell all that it was he who took the lion's share of the fighting in the battle itself, showing off bloody spears marked with his insignia as proof that he killed more barbarians than any man there. On the periphery of these machinations stands Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who commanded the Roman cavalry on the right wing, ready to begin his own ascent to power. Sulla and Marius already have cracks in their relationship over who deserved the greatest acclaim for the victory in the African Jugurthine War. But Rome has had rivalries before. For centuries, the Republic's glory was built on its citizens for greatness, but these efforts ultimately worked toward building the strength of the Republic. Nothing in Marius and Sulla's rivalry indicates that it will be any different, and anyone who witnessed Rome's devastating victory in the Cimbrian War will attest that the Republic is stronger than ever. As someone who enjoys making videos about battles, I'm happy to recommend today's sponsor, Supremacy 1914, a free military strategy game set in World War I, where you command a real country, its economy and armies in a battle for world domination. Supremacy 1914 rewards deep strategic planning and tactical execution. You play against up to 499 players in real-time online games that can last for weeks. Use many different units to build your army, cavalry, tanks, artillery and more. Boost your war effort with heroes, powerful units with unique skills that increase capabilities of units under their command, such as movement speed, firepower of artillery, or defensive strength of infantry, to name a few. And stormtroopers are my favorite, the embodiment of aggression and fierce offensive firepower. Specialized to assault enemy fortifications, these units are your go-to force to spearhead powerful offensives. Supremacy 1914 is available on all major platforms. Click the link below or scan my QR code to get an exclusive free starter pack containing hero medals for a level 1 unlock of legendary hero Lawrence of Arabia and 1 month of premium account features. The offer is valid for the next 30 days. When Marius returns to Rome, he is in much the same position that Scipio Africanus occupied following his own victory at Zama a century earlier. Marius is simply too big to fit into Rome's ardently hierarchical institutions. Now 6 times consul and a military victor on a par with the greatest names in the Republic's history, there are many in the Senate and beyond who believe that he has had enough plaudits and offices, and it is time for him to move to the backbenches. His voice will still carry weight and respect, of course, but other men from great families are in need of appointments, and Marius has had his fair share. Marius himself, however, has no such intentions. He promised to reward the men that served him with land, and he will do so despite the opposition of the great men of the Senate. With this as his objective, in the aftermath of his and Catullus's shared triumphs in the city, he allies with Lucius Appius Saturninus, a tribune running for re-election. Saturninus pledges that he will pass Marius's land legislation in return for support of his policies of legal and welfare reform. Marius, still serving out the 6th of the 7 consulships that a fortune teller had told him he would win in life, takes the terms and agrees to assist Saturninus, along with a praetor, Gaius Servilius Glaucia. This triumvirate of sorts succeeds in having Saturninus re-elected, but the campaign is marred by assassination and intimidation. Marius gets what he wants when Saturninus introduces a replica of the law used for settling his veterans of the war in Africa, and now Italian lands will be used for settling those who recently fought the campaigns and battles with the Cimbri. The inclusion of Italian veterans into this settlement loses Marius's triumvirate the support of the greater part of the Roman mob, however. The next year's elections see Glaucia attempting to run for consul, but his and Saturninus's underhand tactics devolve into outright assassination of political opponents. Their competitor Gaius Memmius is lynched by a mob on election day, throwing the entire process of the Republic's most cherished institutions into chaos. Saturninus and Glaucia hold themselves up in the capital and settle down to a siege. Marius, their former ally, now completely forswears them and comes to the patricians' side. He takes command of the city forces sent to arrest the fugitives, and with his usual forensic approach to battle, he has his men surround and seal the capital, and then cut all of the water pipes to the main precinct at its crest. Saturninus, Glaucia, and their adherents surrender in short order. Marius has the 2 leaders locked into the Curia Hostilia, the sacred meeting place of the Senate, thinking that such august premises will forestall both attacks and attempts to free the prisoners. In the event, the outcome is one that few people could have imagined. Supporters and members of the patrician order climb onto the roof of the Senate House and make a hole in the ceiling through which they can view the captives. Next, they begin throwing roof tiles down on the hapless firebrands, who have no means of shelter or escape. Saturninus and Glaucia are killed, and the floor of the Senate runs red with blood. In the aftermath, while the Republic avoids the mess that would have resulted from a treason trial, Marius loses credit with both sides, and he goes into voluntary but effective exile to the east, once more mirroring the fate of Scipio Africanus. Sulla, meanwhile, has a slow start to his political career. In spite of his fame as the man who captured Jugurtha, he fails to win election for the praetorship in 99 BC, possibly as a result of the fact that his old commander and friend Marius does not lend him support. Dismissing the setback, Sulla runs again the next year and pledges that he will hold lavish games in the event of his election. He wins the praetorship, and his journey on the Cursus Honorum has begun. His games include the then unheard-of number of 100 lions, who are put on display and pitched against Numidian hunters for the entertainment of the city. From his praetorship, Sulla is entrusted in 96 BC with the governorship of Cilicia, the territory only recently claimed for the Republic by Marcus Antonius in southern Anatolia. Long a haven for pirates, Sulla is seen as a man who can manage and dominate in equal measure, taking the fight to the pirates and educating them in the reality that there is no stronger force than Rome. Fortune intervenes, however, before Sulla can fully engage himself in brawling with vagabonds. Mithridates, the ambitious and dangerous king of Pontus, has defeated and expelled Ariobarzan, the king of Cappadocia, a Roman ally, and Sulla's new mission is to correct this state of affairs. With only a skeleton force of regular legionaries, Sulla draws on auxiliaries from Rome's allies in the vicinity and marches directly into Cappadocia, where his campaign in the mountainous and difficult terrain is wrought with such resounding success and capability that his troops proclaim him Imperator at its close. Ariobarzanes is re-established as king, and a strong message of Rome's strength is sent to recalcitrant monarchs like Mithridates and Tigranes of Armenia. This message resounds even further afield, for when Sulla reaches the banks of the Euphrates, an embassy from an hitherto uncontacted empire is waiting to greet him: the Parthians. Heirs to the Persian empires of antiquity, the Parthians are keen for a treaty of understanding and peace with this new Western power, and Sulla grants them a conference. In the course of the talks, he places himself at the center, putting the Parthian ambassador in the same rank as the lowly king of Cappadocia. The treaty is concluded and sent to the Senate for ratification, but the Parthian Shahanshah would have his ambassador put to death for allowing such humiliation at the talks. Thus, Sulla begins what will be 700 years of Roman-Persian rivalry with a characteristic act of psychological one-upmanship. Meanwhile, Marius visits the court of Mithridates and bluntly addresses the monarch with the stark statement, "King, either be stronger than Rome, or else obey her commands in silence." It is advice that Mithridates takes to heart. With the actions of Marius and Sulla, Rome may appear to be in an unassailable position, but this notion is challenged in the harshest manner imaginable at the close of the decade. Across Italy, rebellions break out in 91 BC, between cities and regions unhappy at Roman hegemony and the continued lack of improved access to the benefits of Roman citizenship, as well as the terrible losses their populations have suffered fighting Roman wars. The chief tribes fighting against Rome are the Marsi, Samnites, and Lucanians, old rivals of the Republic from its early days. Marius and Sulla, now back in Rome, both take command roles under the serving consuls. Sulla operates in the southern theatre, while Marius goes to the north. But Marius rises to full command following the death of the consul Publius Rutilius Lupus at the Battle of the Tolenus River. Marius is commended for his actions in what is otherwise a defeat for the Republic. He and Sulla work together once more when they combine forces to break rebel hosts at the Fucina Lake. However, Marius is criticized in the aftermath for apparent lethargy and an unwillingness to destroy opponents, as he did against the Teutones and Cimbri. He does not follow up victories and seems content to sit out the war, waiting for negotiations to settle matters. Likely, Marius is following the same pattern as he used in Gaul, where he waited for several campaign seasons until his forces and terrain were so perfectly aligned that victory was inevitable. But there are many now who believe that Marius's sympathies do not lie with the interests of Rome's great men, but instead with the Italian provincials of his ancestry. Sulla, meanwhile, is given his own army after the death of consul Lucius Porcius Cato, and embarks on a string of victories in 89 BC. Pompeii, Stabiae, Iuclanum, Isernia, Boiano, all fall, and Sulla begins to utterly eclipse his old commander, Marius. His reward is a grass crown, the most rarefied military decoration in the Roman military, never conferred except at a crisis of extreme desperation, and never voted except by the acclamation of the whole army. When the elections are held to decide the consuls for the next year, Lucius Cornelius Sulla is inevitably the victor. In former times, this might have been how matters came to a rest. The older warrior gently pushed aside for the new, the city of Rome ever progressing toward its destiny above all others. But in far-off Asia, the Republic's wealthiest province, King Mithridates of Pontus has built up his strength just as Marius told him, and he launches a spectacular and bloodthirsty assault on the Romans. With so many opportunities for trade and profit, citizens have flooded the western seaboard of Anatolia and its great mercantile cities, and it is these Roman colonists that are Mithridates' targets. To prepare the ground, he establishes an alliance with Tigranes of Armenia, and with Rome's best men and its legions fighting fellow Italians back in their homeland, he casually invades the Roman ally kingdom of Bithynia, while Tigranes overruns Cappadocia and sends Sulla's former charge Ariobarzanes into exile again. A single legion under Manius Aquilius works with King Nicomedes of Bithynia and initially succeeds in scaring off the invaders and even invading Pontus. But once Mithridates perceives that Rome has nothing else to send, he proceeds to push a fleet through the Bosphorus and Byzantium, overwhelm Aquilius, capture him, and occupy the entire Anatolian seaboard. Worse, he orders the total and unhindered mass murder of all Roman and Latin-speaking inhabitants of the lands under his occupation. The killing squads and mobs of disgruntled, riled-up locals are merciless to man, woman, and child, and the figures given for the dead are in the high tens of thousands. With Mithridates simultaneously presenting himself as the representative of Greek Hellenic culture over Roman domination, the cities of Greece also rise in revolt, throwing off their subservience to the Republic and proclaiming their ancient freedoms. For all of that, their timing is among the worst in history, for by 88 BC, the victories of Sulla and other Roman generals meant that the social war is essentially at an end, and Rome now has a huge experienced army in the field. And its honor demands that retribution, in the most savage and violent form, is meted out on those who dared to lay hands on its citizens. Upwards of half a dozen legions are at Nola, completing the siege and starving one of the last holdouts of the social war, ready to be shipped east, where they will be expected to enact a holocaust of revenge. The competition among Rome's leading men for command of this army is fierce. The glory from the campaign to restore Rome's honor will supersede any plaudits in living memory. There is also the wealth that will come to the soldiers and their general. Asia, with its trading routes from north and east, contains a vast amount of treasure, and its conqueror can expect to become the richest man in Rome as a result. This is a potent mix, but Sulla is the man of the moment, and it is to him that is granted the command. To almost everyone, the matter is thus at an end, but not for Marius. Now almost 70 years old, he has been training in public at the Campus Martius, attempting to prove that he maintains his prowess. Unable to allow Sulla to take this ultimate accolade, he forms another questionable political alliance with the tribune Publius Sulpicius. Sulpicius wishes not only to enfranchise Italians into the citizenship of Rome, but even place them among the voting tribes of Rome itself, a step too far for the arch-patrician Sulla and his co-consul Quintus Pompeius Rufus, who is actually a close relative of Sulla's through the marriage of their respective son and daughter. They block Sulpicius's legislation, but Marius pledges to support it so long as Sulpicius agrees to have Sulla's military command transferred to him. Thus, the two effective revolutionaries march into the city at the head of a body that consists of hundreds of equestrians and thousands of plebs to force through their legislation. When Sulla and Rufus attempt to legally block it once more, Sulpicius incites his followers to attack, and Rufus's son is killed in the ensuing violence. Completely outnumbered by this mob and effectively defenseless, Sulla flees, finding shelter in Marius's house. An indescribable humiliation. Marius intercedes and saves Sulla's life, letting him leave to finish off the siege at Nola. But as soon as he has escaped the city, Marius and Sulpicius enact their bill, and Sulpicius uses his tribunate powers to name Marius commander of the expedition to the east. This is a highly unorthodox break with the established precedents and customs of the Republic's Mos Maiorum, the order on which rests the foundations and stability of the state. Marius holds no serving public office, and new military commands are supposed to be assigned to serving consuls. Sulla is with his army at Nola when he hears the news of his removal. Already, Marius's legate is on his way from Rome to take over his post. It is a moment of supreme decision. Do nothing, and Sulla's career and possibly even his life will be over. Fight, that is, lead a Roman army against Rome for the first time in its 400 years as a republic, and he will likely die also. But there is a chance he may win. Sulla tells his soldiers that they have lost the eastern campaign, and Marius will likely recruit his own army to fight the war against Mithridates. This lights the fuse, and when Marius's representatives arrive, they are stoned to death by the legionaries. Sulla then gives orders to march on Rome. All of Sulla's senior officers except one desert him, unwilling to take part in such a sacrilege. Marius musters what forces he can in the city, but they are improvised and slapdash, no match for hardened legionaries in their organized units with a command structure. The Senate sends a delegation to interrogate Sulla, but he brushes them aside and moves into the city, Marius's mobs making no dent. Marius himself, along with his son and some others, manages to escape to Africa, and Sulla takes over the reins of government. Sulpicius is killed in the tumult. With his command returned, Sulla has it fixed that Marius and his main conspirators are banished, and then he holds elections and embarks on his eastern campaign. His departure is a haphazard affair. Already his political enemies are issuing warrants and summons for his indictment, and one of the newly elected consuls for 87 BC, Lucius Cornelius Cinna, is an inveterate and vocal enemy of Sulla. Sulla has him and his fellow consul, Gnaeus Octavius, make oaths that they will not alter the new laws in his absence. But no sooner has Sulla taken ship to the east that Cinna takes command of the remaining units at Nola and begins plans for his own march on Rome. Worse for Rome and the Republic, Marius returns from Africa, demented with rage and thirst for vengeance. In complete contrast to the chaos and murder now engulfing Rome, Sulla's campaign in the east is a complete triumph. First, he decamps to Greece and puts Athens to the siege. The Athenian democracy has been refounded, Sulla is informed by its delegates. Its leader Ariston stands on the walls and shouts poems mocking Sulla's appearance. With 5 crack legions digging trenches and launching boulders at their defenses, the embassy attempts to speak of their city's contribution to drama, philosophy, and the defeat of the Persians. Sulla waves his hand and tells them that Rome has no interest in ancient history. To prove the truth of this, the legions cut down the tree groves of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and use them to construct their siege engines. When the walls are breached, the sack is without mercy or measure. All of the city, including the Acropolis, is plundered of art and riches. Thousands die on the end of a legionary pilum or gladius. Sulla stops short of burning the city to the ground for its insolence, but following his departure, Athens will never rise again. Marching north, he moves directly for the armies Mithridates has sent to Greece. But he does not hurry so much that he misses the opportunity to plunder both Delphi and Olympia. Rome's forces in Macedonia have managed to hold the province against the armies that Mithridates has sent by land over the Hellespont, as well as by sea. Sulla entrusts his very able quaestor, Lucius Licinius Lucullus, with travelling the Greek ports and raising a fleet, which he does very ably, raising strong forces from Rhodes, and they use this to blockade Mithridates from landing reinforcements or further hosts into the territory. At Chaeronea, immediately after the sack of Athens, Sulla's legions meet for the first time with Mithridates' armies. Commanded by his general Archelaus, the Pontic force contains almost 100 scythed chariots, which appear to the Romans as something from the Trojan War. But the tactics of Achilles do little against the cohorts and equites cavalry. Plutarch tells us that 50,000 Pontic troops lie dead at the close of the battle, while Sulla maintains he loses just a dozen men. Hyperbole aside, Sulla marches on as though the first Pontic army had not been there, and moves south. Another Roman army arrives in Greece led by Lucius Valerius Flaccus, the current consul, along with Cinna. At the same time, refugees from the mother city, including senators, begin to arrive at Sulla's headquarters. They tell stories that Cinna and Marius have turned Rome into a battlefield and bloodbath, a charnel house where anyone suspected of collusion with Sulla, or even the thought of dissent, is murdered by the coldest means. Cinna's fellow consul Octavius has been murdered. Sulla's opponents have made allies with Rome's enemies from the Social War, most notably the Samnites, and Sulla's own wife and children have been forced to run. At around the same time the escapees arrive at his camp in Boeotia, news comes in that Marius has died, apparently of natural causes, a little under 2 weeks since he began his 7th consulship. Flaccus is now hunting for Sulla, announcing that his right to command has been revoked, and he is to step down as general of his army. Wishing to deal with Flaccus and the Cinnan factions who have grievously insulted him, Sulla nevertheless knows that the current overriding concern is Mithridates. At Orchomenus in the chill late months of 86, he confronts another Pontic army, twice his own force's size, and annihilates it once more. At one point, when the Roman lines are wavering, Sulla himself rides into the fray and inspires his men to fight with him. Pontic forces in Greece cease to operate in the aftermath, and in spite of Mithridates' crimes, Sulla negotiates first through the Pontic king's generals, and then with the king himself. Mithridates will withdraw from all Roman territories, furnish Sulla with thousands of pounds of treasure, and gift him a fleet of 80 ships. While these negotiations are in process, Flaccus suffers a mutiny by his troops and is killed by them, a sign of the instability on the Marian Cinna side, and their command is taken by Gaius Flavius Fimbria. He marches this Roman army into Anatolia to confront Mithridates in person and aid the rebellions that are starting against him there. Needing to protect his rear, Sulla too goes to the province of Asia, and no sooner has he shown himself to Fimbria's army than they mutiny once more and declare themselves for him. Sulla collects yet more treasure over the following years in Anatolia, and by the year 84 BC, he is ready to return to Italy. When his fleet appears off Brundisium, it is like nothing that any of those present have seen in their lives. More than 1,200 ships, greater than the armada sent to rescue Helen from Troy, disgorges an army of men utterly changed by their experiences of the last half-decade. The Senate, led by the faction of Cinna and Marius, attempts to persuade Sulla to abandon his command, but he dismisses this with contempt. Too much has happened since Sulpicius, Marius, and then Cinna conspired to destroy him. He gave mercy the first time he marched on Rome. Now, Sulla has no such noble intentions. Though Cinna, like Marius, has since died, killed by his own mutinous troops when attempting to pass over to Greece the year before, Sulla's enemies in Italy remain strong. In Cinna and Marius's place are Gnaeus Papirius Carbo, Cinna's consular colleague for 85 BC, and now acting as a proconsul of sorts, along with Gaius Marius the Younger, Marius's heir and quite capable in his own right. At the same time, the two presiding consuls, Lucius Cornelius Scipio Asiaticus and Gaius Norbanus, both opposed the restitution of Sulla's command, property and citizenship, and they each command a separate consular army of the old style. The anti-Sullan side have had 5 years to prepare for the renegade's return, and along with the resources of Italy and its tribes, they also have access to the wealth of Roman holdings in Spain and Africa. Their potential pool of manpower is reasonably estimated at 150,000 men. Sulla meanwhile begins his journey up the peninsula with his 5 legions, the most experienced and effective battle army in the Mediterranean, no doubt, but he also has doubts about their reliability. Firstly, Italian and Roman citizens all, they have been away from home for more than half a decade. In the east, they have accumulated more wealth than they could ever have hoped to earn in their lifetime. Their ostensible commander, Sulla, has no actual legal right to keep them under the banner. To forestall the legionaries simply walking away the moment they come close to home, Sulla has them swear they will remain in his service until dismissed, an oath he prays they will give adherence. At the same time, while the men may stay in his service, there is real reluctance among the Sullan veterans to use their arms against fellow Roman citizens. One of the grievances Cinna's men had when they lynched him was the threat that they would fight fellow Romans. Sulla does not want to share the same fate. There will be none of the limited action that accompanied Sulla's first march on Rome. There is no guarantee that his men will follow orders when the time comes for a pitched battle against another Roman army. A triple boost to morale begins when the former praetor and patrician scion Metellus Pius joins Sulla on the Via Appia with a body of soldiers, lending his cause a fresh layer of legitimacy. Next arrive 2 young men whose families were dealt extraordinarily brutal blows during Marius and Cinna's purges. Gnaeus Pompey and Marcus Licinius Crassus have both lost their fathers to the Marian factions, and each has vowed revenge. Both have raised a legion on their own initiative, and now bring them to Sulla, who predicts a bright future for both. His clear preference for Pompey, however, seems to irk the slightly older Crassus. In spite of the Samnites' seeming support for his enemies, Sulla's march through their region is without incident. Knowing that Scipio Asiaticus and Norbanus await him in Campania, blocking the 2 roads that can be taken to Rome, Sulla comes off the Via Appia at Caudium and then moves to Saticula and on to Calatia. His objective is Capua, the second city of Italy and a powerful base of operations he cannot allow to operate in opposition at his rear while he marches on Rome. Approaching the metropolis, his army scale Mount Tifata, and coming over the crest, they spy a sight that none wish to see on this march. It is Norbanus's consular army. The consul has situated his forces, which likely consist of up to 50,000 men, by the river Volturnus, where the Via Appia meets the Via Latina. Marius the Younger is present with him, while Metellus stands with Sulla. Buoyed by the fact that many of Marius and Cinna's former supporters are defecting to his side, Sulla sends envoys to Norbanus, offering him mercy and the opportunity to abandon the men Sulla holds to be murderers. Both Norbanus and young Marius are implacably opposed to Sulla, however, and not only do they refuse his terms, Sulla's ambassadors are also physically assaulted while under the flag of truce. They arrive back at Sulla's camp, disheveled and bloody, and Sulla can point to them and tell his legionaries that this is the welcome they will get from the murderous authorities that have seized Rome's institutions. He asks what they as men and Romans will choose to do next. It is the spark. Without waiting for their officers to order them into proper deployment, and without any official assent from their general, Sulla's legionaries sprint down the hill at full pace and launch themselves at Norbanus's camp. In most circumstances, such an attack would lead to disaster, but Norbanus's legions are ill-prepared in comparison to Sulla's veterans, and they have had no time to prepare for a defense. With precise and practiced moves, but with fury permeating every action, Sulla's men leap over the fossa ditches, the Ager ramparts, and tear through the Vallum palisades. All thought that they are attacking fellow citizens is lost in the fog of battle. While Sulla watches in satisfaction, Norbanus realizes very quickly that all is lost, and he orders a general withdrawal. This is carried out relatively successfully, but by the time the last remnants of the anti-Sullans are rushing along the road to Capua, harried all the while by the veterans, fully 7,000 of Norbanus's legionaries lie dead in their wake. Sulla will later give the extraordinary and shameless figure of 70 for his own casualties. Whatever the true number, it is most certainly lighter than that of his opponents. Sulla continues toward Capua, and with his army now tasting victory once more, he is adamant that his campaign has only begun. It is Rome's first true civil war. For those still with a mind to the sacred, a line has been crossed at Tifata, a line that will not allow those passing any semblance of return. Roman has killed Roman on the field of battle, offering the souls of their fellow citizens to Mars, and it is clear that the city without equal in the history of the world will never be the same again. Don't forget to check out Supremacy 1914. Click the link below or scan my QR code to get an exclusive starter pack containing hero medals for a level 1 unlock of legendary hero Lawrence of Arabia and 1 month of premium account features. The offer is valid for the next 30 days. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and you get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. You can also show your support by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to my channel as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, I'll see you in the next one.